Hello. Welcome to the Neurocareers podcast, a podcast about the careers in the field of neuroscience and neurotechnologies. My name is Milena Korostenskaya, or simply Dr. K. I am a neuroscientist, university professor, and I am also a career life coach for scientists and engineers. This podcast is brought to you by the Institute of Neuroapproaches. Today we're talking about how to be successful in our jobs, how to alleviate stress and anxiety and achieve the results that we want to achieve in our careers. We are learning from people who made great achievements in their careers, and we're finding out about the groundbreaking work that they are doing. Our guest speaker is Christoph Guger, who has PhD in electrical engineering, and he is a CEO of g.tec company located in Austria. Dr. Guger's company is the major supplier of brain-computer interface systems in the world. Let's welcome Dr. Guger.
Hello, Milena. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. Christoph, can you tell our listeners what is brain-computer interface in simple words that everybody can understand?
The brain-computer interface is a measuring brain activity, and the goal is to control external devices in real time or to extract information from the brain that can be used in other applications.
So what are those major applications that BCIs can be used for?
Brain-computer interfaces can be used for many different applications. One of them is, for example, stroke rehabilitation. We developed, for example, a system that's called Recoverix. And in this case, we use the brain-computer interface to extract motor imagery information from the cortex. So the system is instructing a patient to imagine, for example, left-hand movement. The brain-computer interface can pick it up. And then we trigger in real time a functional electrical stimulator of the left hand so that the hand is really moving. This is something that stroke patients like a lot, especially if they were paralyzed for many years. Because if they do the motor movement imagination of the left hand, suddenly the hand moves again. And they can also feel the movement. This is fed back to the sensory motor cortex. This is producing more activation, and it becomes easier for the brain-computer interface to detect it. And this is very nice because it also works 1 year, 10, 20, 30 years after the stroke. And we can enhance and restore motor functions by using this principle. Then you can also use brain-computer interfaces, for example, for patients with disorders of consciousness. So these patients are mostly in a hospital and they are just lying in a bed. And they cannot communicate, so they cannot move, they cannot speak. And for that reason, the family and also the physicians don't have any information if they can follow commands. And in this case, we can use the brain-computer interface to figure out if they have command following. And we are doing this with little vibro-tactile stimulators. So these are little vibrators that we put on the left and right hand. Then the patient can concentrate, for example, on the left vibrations or right vibrations to say yes and no. So we are calibrating the brain-computer interface for 2.5 minutes to learn how the EEG patterns, the brain waves look for a specific patient. Afterwards, we can understand if the patient has command following. The physician can ask the patient, for example, 10 questions where we know also the answers, like, are you living in Florida? Is your first name Milena? Something like that. Then the patient can say yes and no with the brain-computer interface. And if the patient is answering most of the questions correctly, then we have a scientific proof, which is very objective, that the patient was understanding everything correctly. This is, of course, a game changer for the family and also the physicians if they understand that the patient can follow conversations. Another application is also from the medical field. In this case, we use brain-computer interfaces for finding the most important areas of the brain. So if people have epilepsy or a tumor, then they have to go to a neurosurgery unit so that the epilepsy source is removed or the tumor is removed. When the neurosurgeon is cutting out the brain tissue, of course, he doesn't want to cut out important regions of the brain. And with our brain-computer interface, you can find these important regions very, very quickly. So there's, for example, one region in the brain responsible for the index finger. And with the brain-computer interface, you can map the location of the index finger very quickly. Then the neurosurgeon knows what he should not remove. So these are medical applications, but you can also use it, for example, for locked-in patients or also for healthy people to communicate. In this case, you can type with the brain-computer interface single letters to form words and sentences, and this allows you to communicate with the brain-computer interface.
Thank you so much, Christoph. That is very impressive. Can you also describe what became available with the advent of brain-computer interfaces that was not available before? For example, you are talking about this therapy for patients after stroke, or you are talking about the evaluation of consciousness. What is available now that wasn't, for example, 10 years ago?
10 years ago, there was almost nothing available in terms of brain-computer interface applications. So the whole research started more or less 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, people were moving a cursor to the left or to the right side of the screen. It was very limited. And just a few years ago, people started with these medical applications that I just mentioned. 10 years ago, people could already use a brain-computer interface to spell. So this was intended for locked-in and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis patients, people who are completely paralyzed, to have a communication aid. So now 10 years later, this technology become much cheaper and smaller and much easier to use. So nowadays, everybody can just download it and use it on his computer. And this can be used for communication again, but you can also control, for example, little robots like the Sphero, or you can paint with the brain-computer interface, or you can control avatars that you can design in Unity. It can work together with virtual reality headsets, HMDs from different manufacturers. So there are a lot of different opportunities nowadays.
Now my question is, why did you decide to work in the field of BCIs? Why BCIs?
So I was studying in the US at Johns Hopkins University, and doing my studies, they mentioned a professor from Austria. This was Gerd Pfurtscheller. Then I returned to Austria to do my PhD in Pfurtscheller's lab. And as usual, you have to go far away to learn what's good at home. So I could start with my brain-computer interface research in his lab. This was one of the few labs 20 years ago working on brain-computer interfaces. It's fascinating because you can just extract information directly from the brain, which is invisible if you don't have a brain-computer interface. And that's also important. If you work with brain-computer interfaces, then you have to use it for something that you cannot extract it otherwise. So you will never be able to replace, for example, the typing speed of a computer keyboard with the brain-computer interface, but you can extract other information that you wouldn't see otherwise. We are also organizing brain-computer interface hackathons. There was one interesting project last year in Japan, in Miyazaki. One team developed a computer game where one person was playing Super Mario with the computer keyboard, and another person with a brain-computer interface was helping him to complete the game, and he could destroy obstacles with the brain-computer interface so that Super Mario could move along the path and complete the game. So only together they could solve actually the computer game and come to the next level. And suddenly the BCI system becomes very useful because it gives you some additional information that you cannot solve with the keyboard.
I understand your choice. It's an extremely fascinating field. In fact, extracting all those signals from the brain is amazing. However, you decided not to go further into academia, but you decided to establish your own company, basically become an entrepreneur with your own company, producing your own equipment. Why did you make that decision instead of becoming a person in academia who works with BCI?
This was always clear that I wanted to run my own business with my own responsibilities. So it was not the choice for me to stay at the big university where you are dependent on many other people and institutions. And now in g.tec, we are almost doing the same like a university. So we have different research departments. We have about 15 different research projects with more than 50 partners internationally. We are just running with our own speed. It's very interesting, and beside that, we can also produce really useful pieces of equipment that we can sell internationally. So the devices are medical devices, so we have FDA clearance and CE approval and so on. This is also very nice for us because it generates turnover every year, and for that reason, we are independent from research grants. What we do is also long-lasting because our employees stay for a very long time in our company, and they don't leave after finishing, for example, the PhD. And for that reason, we can build up a lot of knowledge with the whole team that's working here at g.tec.
Christoph, what would be your advice for young engineers, aspiring scientists who want to build their own businesses, but they're afraid to do this? Many people have problems with that. They're scared to make that step. What would be your advice?
So first, I would study abroad. So go to another country to see how research and development is done somewhere else, so that you see something else and that you're also independent. You have to realize everything yourself without the help of all your friends and your families. So this is a very good lecture that you can learn. And you have to develop a certain skill which is unique. Then you have to put all your energy into this skill to develop the company. A common mistake that I see is that people stay still at the university, so they get some income from the university, and beside that they try to run a company. But normally this doesn't work, because to be successful with a company, you have to put all your energy into the company. And it's actually the same for the university. So if you want to be successful, you should focus on the university and not have a company beside that. Then I think everything comes automatically.
Of course, running a company, it sometimes comes with challenges. What challenges did you experience when you were building your business? What strategies did you use to overcome those challenges?
When you build your business at the beginning, of course, you need money. So we got, for example, some financing from the Austrian government because we were a spin-off from the University of Technology in Graz. They provided, I think it was like 20,000 euros to spin-offs from the university, and we invested these 20,000 euros into our first MATLAB license. MATLAB is much more expensive for companies, but you need the official license to be allowed to program in MATLAB and to sell the code. So at the beginning, you definitely need money. When we got the first orders, we had to invest a lot of working time, and we sold the software just for a little bit of money, but it's important that you get some income. Afterwards, you can already resell what you produce. So it becomes easier with every single order that you get, and you have to build up your portfolio so that you can always sell it internationally, and it becomes stronger and stronger, and you can ask for more and more money when you sell it.
You already several times mentioned the international component. I know you have collaborations virtually in every corner of the world. How important is it, and what benefit does it bring to your company?
International collaboration is very important, especially in the biomedical engineering domain. We are building brain-computer interfaces and neurotechnology, and many of these devices are used with patients and human beings. And if I come back to the brain mapping technology, for example, you need an epilepsy or a tumor patient, and you need a neurosurgeon and a neurologist to apply the brain-computer interface technology. And this is, of course, not something that we can do as engineers from the company. In this case, you have to work together with medical institutions to do it. For the stroke rehabilitation, we work together with rehabilitation centers and physiotherapists, occupational therapists. And for general brain-computer interface research, we work together with many universities. There are always experts sitting at different universities. In Albany, for example, we have experts for high gamma mapping, like in Florida. Your hospital, Milena, is also doing very nice work in this domain. And Dr. Kamada, for example, in Japan, has expertise for phase regions in the brain. So you have to travel to many different researchers and places to explore the whole brain.
Of course, for that international collaboration and collaborating with so many people, you need to have very well developed communication skills. Did they come naturally to you, or you were developing them along the way?
So that's, of course, an advantage of engineering. Everything is in English. There are not really German English books, engineering books available. It also doesn't make sense to translate something into other languages because the whole world speaks English. That's also the reason why we have a very international team. So here we have people from South Korea, from China, from Portugal, Italy, Spain, and so on. That's also a lot of fun to work together with all these engineers. It's also nice because the education is around the world approximately the same. So you can also highly use very efficiently people from other countries helping here with our research team.
You already mentioned that you have this international team. There are engineers, there are people doing other things in your company, managing certain projects, there are some clinicians. It's quite diverse population. You also mentioned that you have a very high retention rate for all your employees, that they stay a long time. Definitely there is something that you are doing to keep everybody enjoying the communication, understanding each other, and feeling good at your company. What are those strategies that you are using?
One important point is, of course, the international team. If people here see that people are coming from other countries to work here, then it must be good. Otherwise, they wouldn't come all the way to work with us. Another important point is, of course, the brain-computer interfacing is interesting. Many people want to work in this domain because it includes brainwave measurements, signal processing, classification, designing experimental paradigms, working together with other neuroscientists and medical doctors and all this stuff. So there are a lot of different disciplines required, which is a lot of fun. Most important is that whatever we do is long-lasting. So medical technology is very long-lasting. So our first biosignal amplifier, for example, was built 20 years ago, and we are still selling it because it's a very long process to get FDA clearance or CE clearance, but the technology is long-lasting. That's not like a cell phone, which is old after 1 year, but it also takes longer to bring technology to the market. So people nowadays don't know so much about brain-computer interfaces at hospitals, for example, so they don't know so much the benefits. That's also the reason why we have to educate doctors and so on how to use it correctly. We have also a training facility in our company, so people are coming all the way from the US and Japan and so on to get the training here, and afterwards they're allowed to use the devices at home, in the hospital, or at the university.
I went to one of those trainings. I visited your company, and I was very impressed by the warm and nice feeling that is in your company. So what is that human component that you provide that makes everybody feel well in your company?
That's very simple. Everybody should be nice to the other person. But everybody's an expert here for something, and that's the reason why people can respect each other. And like mentioned before, they're coming from all around the world to bring their expertise in. This makes it very productive.
Here we are talking about achieving goals in this podcast series, and you are a great example of that. You achieved so much in this field of building your company, building successful business, building devices that are used all over the world and very high quality devices. You are providing great service support to all the people who purchase your products. You have many important achievements. My question is, how do you set your goals? Do you have specific strategy? Do you write your goals down? Do you do your daily planning, weekly planning, monthly planning, or yearly even planning to achieve those goals?
First of all, we are attending about 200 conferences and meetings every year. This means we have a lot of exposure to international people doing nice research, developments, and medical applications. And this allows us to speak with experts like you. And this allows me also to extract the trends and what's important for our customers or future customers. And this flows back into our development team. And normally people start with a PhD here that we do, of course, with a university, but they become experts for something, and then our PhDs mostly become their own development unit. So maybe you remember Christoph Guger. He worked about the high gamma mapping and brain-computer interfaces with invasive BCIs. When he finished his PhD, he became the team leader for invasive technology. Now he already has a big team and he is coordinating all the guys. This is, of course, very nice for people. It's a very nice future perspective.
Yes, of course, I remember Christoph Guger, and he is a great expert now in functional gamma mapping and invasive technologies. Wonderful to hear that now he leads the whole team. My next question is, are you planning your work ahead? Do you have plans for 5 years, 10 years, 25, 50 years? Is there anything like that that you are doing in regards to developing technologies at your company?
So it's depending. We have research projects mostly from the European Commission under the Future Emerging Technology Call. These are projects which look into applications which might come to the market in 20 years. That's very much ahead in the future. That's a very nice environment to get inspiration of what can be useful in future. Then we have also projects which look maybe 5 years ahead. So this is already more engineering oriented. And then we have projects that we want to bring within half a year to the market. So it's a mixture of everything. One of these future emerging technology projects was, for example, VERE. In this case, we used non-invasive, but also invasive brain-computer interfaces to control avatars. And we had project members who designed robotic avatars, and other project members designed virtual avatars. And the goal was to give a human being a body back so that you can control the full avatar with your brain-computer interface. This is, of course, nothing which will be available very soon, but the project provided a very nice field for doing a lot of research for the future.
You mentioned that you are involved in so many projects. You also said that you are attending about 200 conferences a year and extracting all that information. There are so many other things that you're involved in. You have all those research streams, research areas that are going on at g.tec. Does it become overwhelming at times? I would assume that it does. So when there is so much things going on, how are you handling this maybe feeling of overwhelm and maybe sometimes even stress? How are you working with that?
It's not really stressful and overwhelming because when the company becomes bigger and bigger, I installed just a middle level, so team leaders. And they were mostly doing the PhD beforehand with us. This means they were trained for many, many years and knew exactly what we are doing. And then doing the PhD, they learned also to lead other team members. and to meet project plans and all this stuff. So we have just many different departments at the moment led by different people. And one important aspect is, of course, quality management. So the FDA and also CE forces you to have a quality management system. If your team grows beyond 25 people, then you definitely need the quality management system. Otherwise, you have no control of what somebody is doing and how people can interface. But if you follow these quality management system, then you can very easily streamline all the researchers and developers. Otherwise, it wouldn't be impossible because you would lose a lot of time in conversations and nobody would know what the other person is doing. So just install a quality management system and everything becomes easier.
What are the main areas that you are concentrating on when leading the company?
So I'm doing everything that nobody else wants to do. It's a long time ago that I had a full day of programming. So this was a lot of fun, but this is 10 years ago. So at the moment, I'm just managing the different teams and I try to keep them busy so that all the questions are answered immediately and they can just go ahead.
As CEO of the company, of course, you want to ensure that all your employees are handling the stress well, that can come with the job from time to time, and that they are all staying emotionally healthy. What are you doing to ensure that? Is that quality control, but it's more communication probably between the employees? Maybe there are some other things that you are doing.
So it's one part of the quality management system to monitor it and to keep it in place. But of course, it doesn't work all the time. But then we allow people, for example, to work at other locations that we have. So some people moved, for example, to the US and other people moved to Spain, other people moved to Hong Kong. That's also nice because then you can work together with other people in a different environment. This can also reduce a lot of stress that you might have had beforehand. If you work too long with the same people on the same topic, it helps to go into a different area. And this also, which is nice in a company because we have, of course, sales, we have development, we have production, we have marketing, bookkeeping, and people can just switch from one unit and one location to another.
I also know that you are spending time with your employees. I know that you are all doing some physical activities, which are very important for relieving the stress. You're all climbing the mountains. I saw the pictures. So there are many physical activities actually that you are doing as a team. Do you think that this is something that also contributes to this more healthy and less stressful atmosphere?
Of course, so if you go out to the mountains and you can do something physical like mountaineering, hiking or climbing, this helps a lot to reduce the stress and it's also nice for the team to do something together. So this happens very, very often and whoever wants to join in is welcome. So in winter we go skiing and ski touring, in summer hiking, mountaineering and climbing. So people are just joining in and out as they like. Sometimes they bring their family. So this is of course nice.
Now, in these days of COVID-19, how are you changing your work strategies? Because obviously you cannot all be in an office together. So what changed and what are your main strategies in your work right now?
So many people are working from home, which was not really a problem because we did it also beforehand. So some people were already used to home office, they just stay now longer at home, but everybody had already a portable computer and a good internet connection, so it was not really difficult to manage it. They just come to the company to synchronize, or if they need some hardware components, then they check it out. And we have more work than beforehand because now everybody is at home and needs information. We're also organizing a spring school and some virtual conferences because many of the symposia and conferences and summer schools were cancelled. So it's just a very good opportunity to teach and educate people about brain-computer interface and neurotechnology. So it's a very nice opportunity for physicians and physiotherapists, occupational therapists to learn how to use brain-computer interfaces. different experts talking about how they are using their technology. For example, Stephen Lauris, a world expert for DOC assessment, and Rosella Spataro from Italy, an expert for BCI systems with DOC. We have a high gamma mapping and ECOG brain-computer interface meeting. In this case, we become more invasive. So ECOG electrodes are implanted directly on the cortex, and we will show brain-computer interface experiments that you can do with this invasive technology. And in the week from 20th to 24th of April, we have a spring school. Every day we have 6 or 7 talks. Again, from an international team. There's Paul Sucher from Columbia University, or Dean Grosienski from North Carolina, Milena from Florida. So many different experts. They show how to do brain-computer interface research. In this case, we show P300 spellers for communication, how to run functional electrical stimulation, how to do deep brain stimulation with Parkinson's disease, how to do hyperscanning when you connect many people to a brain-computer interface, and so on.
That sounds fascinating. Where our listeners can find this information?
The Spring Summer School is available on our website, www.g.tec.at. The Recoverix, so the stroke rehabilitation meeting, is available on www.recoverix.at. The DOC meeting on www.mindbeagle.at, and the high gamma mapping meeting on www.cortiq.at.
You talked about many BCI applications, stroke and disorders of consciousness. It can be also used for people with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. There are other applications. What I want to ask you now, are there any developments going on in the field of affective BCIs that can help people to work with their anxiety, with their stress, and with some other emotional or mental issues that they might be having?
Of course, there's, for example, a large network in the US that started recently for depression. So it's similar to the direct brain stimulation approach that you do with Parkinson patients. So they stimulate different regions of the brain in order to reduce depression. As far as I know, there are about 10 institutions working together, including Berkeley and Stanford and so on. And they're active in this domain. In Europe, for example, there's a large network around Claudio Babiloni from Italy, and they work on Alzheimer biomarkers. So they are screening the EEG, and they want to extract if you are in danger of Alzheimer, so that you can intervene early enough. So for many different illnesses, there are large networks around the world working on that.
And you mean brain-computer interfaces specifically? Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you planning on creating something in the field of affective BCIs?
So we provide a research platform, so we call it rapid prototyping environment, where you get all the biosignal amplifiers for recording invasive and non-invasive signals. And then we have also electrical stimulators, which can be applied on the surface, but also invasive directly in the brain. And with this rapid prototyping setup, you can run different scientific experiments. So you can set up very, very quickly the brain-computer interface to do research in these different domains. So you can work on Alzheimer, you can work on depression, and so on.
Well, that's wonderful news that this is available for people, basically creating very quickly a lab where you can run different experiments, including the experiments with affective BCIs.
Yes.
I know that in addition to that, you are also providing similar platforms for students, the students' labs, where they also can learn to work with BCIs and specialize in different areas of BCI technology. Can you tell more about that?
So we are doing two things in terms of education. So first of all, we are running the Brain.io hackathons. These are brain-computer interface hackathons, where people are meeting around the world for like 1 or 2 days. and then they can work on new brain-computer interface applications. So normally we are suggesting between 20 and 30 different topics. And then teams have between 2 and 5 members, and they get 24 hours to work with this platform and to come up with new ideas. So they can, for example, fly a drone with a brain-computer interface or control a Sphero robot. They can analyze dreams while a person is sleeping. They can look at the EEG data and find markers inside the data. Or in one of the hackathons, they designed a gin tonic robot, which was brain-computer interface controlled. So if the person was more relaxed, he got more tonic. If he was more stressed, he got more gin. As a fun application, they work on computer games, on virtual reality. This is very nice because you can meet other people. We have also experts inside the hackathons, which are there for coaching, so you get new connections and maybe you can meet your new PhD supervisor. Beside that, we designed also the so-called unicorn brain interface. So it's a relatively cheap brain-computer interface that students can just get, and then you can use this brain-computer interface to design your own applications. We have also an educational kit. In this case, a professor or a lab can purchase 8 of these unicorn brain-computer interfaces, and they get all the development tools like application programming interfaces for MATLAB, Simulink, Python, .NET, C, and so on. And then they can develop their own applications. And if they have, again, 5 students per team, you can teach actually 40 students for a whole semester. And they learn at the beginning how to handle the hardware and the software. And then they start the programming and the design. And at the end of the semester, they can just do a presentation of what they designed within the last semester, and other people can review it. And in the next semester, the next teams can build on what they did in the first semester. And that's a very funny working environment, and it includes, again, very many different aspects like EEG, data acquisition, pre-processing, signal processing, classification, paradigm, design, robotics, virtual reality, augmented reality. You can just hook it up to your engineering field, what you're doing.
That's an amazing application. I would love to include it with my adaptive neurotechnology course that I'm teaching. I also can say from my own experience, when I was a judge at one of the hackathons that you have organized, that it's an amazing experience for students. That's wonderful that you are organizing them. Now my question is, Christoph, what in your opinion is the future of BCI technology? Where is it heading?
So it's progressing very rapidly, and at the moment it's becoming more invasive and much more closed loop. So 10 years ago, people were just sensing from the brain and analyzing what they sensed, but now they're also stimulating into the brain or into the limbs and muscles. And this makes all the applications much more useful. If I come back to the stroke rehabilitation, one essential part is, for example, the functional electrical stimulation of the hands when the person is imagining the hand movement, because it's closing the loop, and suddenly stroke patients start to learn when they are training. The same is the case for deep brain stimulation and all the other applications. If people work with prosthetic limbs, for example, it's very important to have touch sensation in the prosthetic limb. Otherwise, your hand control will not improve while you're using the system. So this is very good because our engineers have even more work to do, and it's even more fun if you include the closed loop components.
Should we now all switch into engineering field, or there is some space for neuroscientists on these teams? Where do you think the neuroscientists' work comes here?
There's a lot of work for neuroscientists. The engineers, they're just building the biosignal amplifiers and the stimulators, but we need the neuroscientists for running the scientific experiments. The stroke rehabilitation concept, for example, was developed by neuroscientists, or how to assess coma patients was developed by neuroscientists. How to analyze high gamma activity from epilepsy in tumor patients was done by neuroscientists. So engineers themselves couldn't do that.
So that's good news. So those research and neuroscience skills, they're still very handy. Oh, that's amazing. And now, Christoph, how do you imagine the field of BCIs, let's say in 5, 10 years, and maybe then in 20 years?
So there will be much more applications, like a few were mentioned before, like Alzheimer and depression, but there are many more. You can use the same technology for multiple sclerosis, for spinal cord injury. So for all these different fields, new brain-computer interfaces will come out, which is of course very nice. Then there will be much more knowledge in the neuroscience field. We are developing, for example, at the moment a 1000 channel brain-computer interface. This means the spatial resolution will be much, much better than ever seen before. Then you basically have to run every scientific study again, which was done maybe before and with 64 channels. And suddenly, if you get 1000 channels, you can extract much more detailed information, and you will find a lot of new information, and this will lead to new applications again.
Thank you. With it comes another question about invasive BCIs. Most of the studies that you talked about are non-invasive except for functional mapping. However, we heard on the news, for example, from Neuralink, that there are plans to have implantable BCIs and have people using implantable BCIs in the near future. Can you explain that difference between invasive versus non-invasive BCIs? And will people be soon implanted with invasive BCIs?
It's depending on the need. For stroke rehabilitation, for example, we don't need an invasive BCI. With the EEG system on the scalp, we get enough information for running effectively the stroke rehab. The same is the case for the coma assessment or for the communication. We don't need invasive sensors for achieving that. If you look at the tumor and epilepsy patients, then we have to implant the sensors. So first of all, the tumor must be removed anyhow. So neurosurgeons are opening anyhow the scalp, and you get the chance to map for a couple of minutes the cortex with a very high precision that you cannot achieve with functional magnetic resonance imaging or with EEG. So with the implanted sensors, with the ECOG technology, you are much more precise. That's important for the patient because you are rescuing certain important functions of the cortex. And then there are other applications where implanted brain-computer interfaces are useful. So this means the system stays permanently inside the body. This is, for example, very important for the direct brain stimulation for Parkinson patients, or if you want to control, for example, a prosthesis. Then you don't want to assemble a brain-computer interface every single day to use it because it's just unpracticable. But if it's implanted, then the system is just available and you can use it every single day. So for these applications, it's essential to have an implant.
Thank you, Christoph. That makes it more clear. What about the common user? You talked mostly about clinical applications. How can healthy people utilize BCIs on a daily basis? And is there a need for that?
Sure. So I spoke beforehand about the unicorn brain interface. This is our low-cost brain-computer interface, and this is just nice for the maker space, for example. So people can use it like the Arduino board, and they get the brain-computer interface sensor, and then you can hook it up to whatever you need: robotics, virtual reality, augmented reality, to art installations. Or artists can use this brain-computer interface to do computer graphics, for example. Or we had a project with Dragan Ilic, who controlled, for example, a KUKA robot. That's a large industrial robot, and he fixed hundreds of pens with different colors on the robot. And then he was creating paintings with the brain-computer interface, and they look really good. So in this case, we are coming to the artistic and maker space. And another application that we have for the unicorn brain interface is called Blondie Check. That's politically incorrect, but it's a funny name for what we are doing. In this case, we show 50 different images, and the person is just watching at the images for 100 milliseconds on each image, and we use the brain-computer interface to rank the pictures of how important they are for your brain. The funny thing is, if we do it with young male subjects, that mostly the blonde girls are ranking first. This is where the name is coming from. You get interesting scenarios when you put, for example, the picture of your mother and of the girlfriend inside, that suddenly the mother ranks before the girlfriend. And suddenly this information becomes embarrassing for the user. These are pretty funny experiments that everybody can do. So you can just feed it with your personal picture set, and the brain-computer interface will tell you which picture is the most important one for your brain. But there are also more serious applications. So you can use it for neuromarketing. You can investigate logos, but also investigate holiday destinations where you want to travel. And you're just looking at the pictures, and afterwards the brain-computer interface tells you go there.
Can you tell a little bit more about that neuromarketing application that you mentioned?
So neuromarketing, it's very difficult to extract an EEG marker that's telling you something. In our case, we use the brain-computer interface for extracting this information. And assume you are feeding the system with 50 different types of logos, and you want to select the best logo for your company. Then the brain-computer interface will tell you which one it is. And we are just viewing each logo for 100 milliseconds, so it's very, very short. And it's actually making decision before you are aware what you are seeing. You can also feed it, for example, with different food items, chips and fish and oranges, and you can select to which type of food your brain is reacting.
Are you using those neuromarketing tools as well for selecting your own pictures that you are using for advertisement, picture selection on your website?
No, because we are not a neuromarketing company, but we use it at exhibitions, so people can use the technology, for example, at the Ars Electronica Festival. And then we have different picture sets available, and you can test just yourself to what your brain is reacting. We have standardized picture sets, and that's very nice because then we can just compare how different brains react.
Another question is that right now there are quite a few companies that are working with coaches, for example, life coaches, neuro coaches, to ensure mental and emotional wellness in the company for both company leaders and for employees. What do you think about this type of work, and if you think that is helpful for both employees and the employer?
I don't have much experience with that, so I prefer to take my team and to go hiking. That's a lot of fun, and I think it's pretty much effective. So I'm working with the outdoor experience.
Judging from the experience that I got from your team, it really works. That's wonderful. Christoph, now if you can say something to all your listeners, some of advice you want to give, please do.
So if you have the choice in your life, if you want to go into brain-computer interface and neurotechnology, I think it's a very good field. It's a lot of fun. It's progressing very rapidly. So you can work in many different domains. So many different types of engineers and neuroscientists and medical persons are working together. That's a lot of fun. So I can only recommend it.
Thank you very much, Christoph. It has been a great pleasure having you in our podcast. Thank you for talking to us and revealing all this amazing information about the brain-computer interfaces. Thank you.
Thank you also, Milena. It's a very nice podcast that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Bye-bye, Christoph.
Bye.
Bye.
More information about the events that Dr. Guger has mentioned in this podcast you can find on his company's website g.tec.at. And again, g.tec.at. Importantly, Dr. Guger is organizing new free online webinars during May and June 2020. You will be able to educate yourself with the latest developments in brain-computer interface and neurotechnology during these events. this is the end of our podcast with Dr. Guger, the CEO of g.tec company. Stay tuned for our new podcast series. A quick spoiler, in our next podcast, you will meet Dr. Elena Salias and learn from her about becoming math cognition expert. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.